Welcome to this class. My name is Gordon Müller-Seitz and I'm happy to host this class on design thinking and innovation processes. Towards this end, I'll introduce to you at first the brief agenda. As for a start, a few administrative remarks before I try to set the stage and elaborate upon what you can expect from this very class. And then I dive into a few selected tools so that you are well equipped for the remainder of this class and get a thorough, brief first understanding of the topic. And then I'll wrap up. By the way, this is also the overarching procedure of the remaining classes or sessions. As for each and every session, I will offer a first overview and set forth the underlying objectives of this very class before we drill into the content deeper and deeper, and finally I'll wrap up again. So that's the general procedure that you can expect from this very class. Now, as for a start in terms of the administrative issues, let me first introduce myself and the overarching ambition of this class. My key research and practitioner-oriented interests revolve around the topics, as the name suggests, around strategy, innovation, cooperation. In terms of strategizing or strategy, I'm interested in how people actually do strategy, not only how they think they're going to do it or the actual outcome, such as, let's say, for the sake of argument, the sketch of a BCG or McKinsey metrics. That's not the strategy per se or what strategizing is about, but I'm more interested in how people actually collaborate so as to come up with a strategy at the end of the day. So that's what strategizing is about. And when it comes to open strategizing, being pointed out here as a first bullet point, I'm particularly interested in how organizations collaborate to jointly define a strategy or jointly influence the way strategy is to be made. So that's open strategizing about, so a collaborative effort and not only an organization internal effort, for the sake of argument, behind closed doors of the top management team. What is more, I'm interested in so-called path dependencies, which relate to the observation, also highly relevant for this class, that oftentimes organizations tend to stick to well-established patterns, i.e. what they can do very well, and for good reasons they do so. However, at some point in time, it might switch and the previous strength might turn into a liability. And that's what path theorizing is about, showing that organizations tend to stick to, for instance, technological or organizational path. And in the long run, this might turn out to be detrimental. Switching to the topic of innovation, I'm highly interested in innovation and digitalization. And as this class revolves around design thinking and innovation processes, this is actually also at the heart of my core research interests. And towards this end, I try to draw your attention to what is innovation management about in the next few sessions. And also within innovation management, you can also lay a focus upon, especially at the intersection of innovation and digitalization, on agile management. And towards this end, I also introduce to you agile management techniques, say a few words about it, such as Scrum, and then point and lay emphasis upon the focus of this class, namely design thinking, and go through the 6 design thinking phases that are lying at the heart of this very class. However, digitalization also revolves around questions in connection with innovation management of, for instance, business model innovations, or how to define and develop business models. This is also something we're going to touch upon. So how can a business model be refined? And there are different ways of how to refine it. That's what we are going to touch upon as well. And you also have the final topic here being sketched at the lower hand part of the slide, namely cooperation, where I'm interested in how organizations do engage with external actors. So not only single organizations, other organizations, but also, for instance, individuals in the course of crowdsourcing or crowd testing, where organizations try to reach out to individuals so as to get money, for instance, in the case of crowdfunding, or where they try to be challenged, for instance, in the case of crowd testing, with regard to their software codes. And moreover, it's of particular interest how organizations collaborate as 3 or more organizations in the so-called constellations of interorganizational networks. So interorganizational networks consist of 3 or more organizations and are particularly relevant when it comes to large-scale challenges such as reducing technological risks, for instance, in the semiconductor industry. I will later on elaborate upon that, or trying to streamline supply chains. So these are key motivations why organizations collaborate together. And I will also inform you about it so as to contextualize what innovation management is about, because innovation management is not only about containing everything within the organization, but also reaching out to other organizations and collaborating with them for joint purposes, for joint goals in the midterm or long run, so as to derive benefits for all parties being involved in the respective collaboration. So this is also being covered in this class and one of my key research fields. Apart from that, I also not only acting as a chair, but I'm also Director of Strategy and Business Model Innovation at the SME Digital Center Kaiserslautern, where we, for the last few years, help SMEs in Germany, in southwestern Germany, so as to engage with digitalization. And towards this end, we also teach them design thinking workshops. We also teach them how to strategize, how to develop new business models. And in particular, we are focusing these days upon AI applications and how organizations, especially SMEs, can benefit from AI and introduce AI into their very organizations. Of course, this is also the topic of this class. It is oftentimes a challenge to introduce these new measures because we tend to stick to what we are doing, and we do not tend to like deviations from or alterations from what we are doing, especially if it is successful. Remember what I mentioned about past dependencies. And this holds true for each and every organization. And since small and medium-sized enterprises, as the very name suggested, do not have so many resources as, for instance, when being compared to large-scale global corporations, it is for them even much more difficult to embrace new technologies and try them out because they lack the resources when being compared to their globally operating large-scale competitors. That's why it's a severe challenge for them. And with our competence center, we try to enable these very organizations to embrace AI and to succeed at the end of the day in the marketplace. And apart from that, I'm managing director of a consultancy company, collaborating with other colleagues from around Germany and advising and supporting both SMEs and large-scale globally operating corporations, primarily in the field of digitalization and innovation, but also strategy and network management. Now, as for the agenda, it's pretty straightforward. As mentioned before, throughout the next 13 sessions, I'm going to introduce to you, first of all, what is innovation management about, and then I'm going to drill deeper and deeper into design thinking related issues. Now, as for this very first session, I'll try to draw your attention to what is innovation management about, what is creativity about, because it lies at the very heart of the whole idea of this very class. And then in session 2 to 4, we will dig deeper into what innovation management is about. So I'll try to draw your attention to the way organizations try to structure their innovation processes, organization internally, and how to develop a research agenda, and also how to develop a joint research agenda with other organizations. So as pointed out, working in networks is oftentimes deemed being the prime objective under certain circumstances, especially if it comes to developing large-scale technologies, which are not easily financed, which are highly imbued with risks and uncertainties. Risks understood here in this context as things where you can calculate the likelihood of an event to occur, whereas uncertainty being in its extreme form at least, the unknown. So you cannot even foresee or estimate what is to be expected. And if it comes to technological progress, for instance, in many technologies, in many industries, think again of the semiconductor industry, or think about manufacturing technologies being married with AI, it's oftentimes unforeseeable what to expect. And towards this end, organizations join forces so as to collaborate with one another to jointly succeed in the marketplace. And that's what I'm trying to draw your attention to, as well as other measures or activities geared towards dealing with other individuals, for instance, as pointed out in the case of crowdsourcing, where you try to attract attention from a large number of undefined people that are supposed to contribute to your ambitions. And thereafter, in the fifth session, I try to draw your attention to the agile management debate, or what agile management is about, a term stemming from the field of software development being introduced to the field of innovation management. And towards this end, design thinking is one of the key tools employed these days, apart from others that you might have heard and come across in different other classes or settings, such as Scrum, Kanban, Lean Management, and the like. And I will focus in particular then later on, as pointed out, on design thinking and introduce to you the design thinking first in session 6 with a broad overview. So what are the 6 phases of design thinking about, before I drill deeper in the remaining sessions, sessions 7 to 13, into each and every phase. And towards this end, in the 7th session, I introduce to you phase 1. So the understand phase, where you try to really get a thorough understanding of the problem at hand. Then I'll start with the second phase, which is about trying to reach out to the potential user base or customers, i.e. the persons that you want to address, i.e. you want to fulfill a certain purpose or need of the persons, be it customers or users, that you try to serve. And this is what phase 2 actually is about. So it's about dealing with them, emphasizing with them, trying to interview them or observe them, or trying to collect archival and or secondary data from numerous sources, be they digitally, i.e. then you oftentimes also call it ethnography. So you take part in an online environment and observe what you gather in a digital fashion, or alternatively, this is called ethnography, that you try to observe in real life, not in a digital environment, what persons are actually doing, and collect in between also all kinds of documents that you try to understand and analyze so as to come to a thorough conclusion how to develop a service or business model or product for the respective target group. And then in the sessions 8 and 9, we'll dig deeper into different kinds of data collection. As pointed out, one option might be interviews. So this is the focus of session 8, where I try to draw your attention to how to conduct an interview with potential customers or users. And then in the 9th session, it will be more about reaching out to them and actually confronting them in their, or visiting them in their own, observing them in their own habitat, in their own sphere. So trying to observe how potential customers or existing users are using a certain product or service. And most of the time not interfering with their operations, but really trying to understand how do these persons actually make use of the product you devised and how to improve it, or how to spot potential pains, i.e. these difficulties they might encounter when using a service or product, which might be quite beneficial for you when you're trying to develop something new, because it helps you to understand where are the problems currently when it comes to using actually the product or service. And this is usually a gem, because you can really learn from where are the failures, and these so-called pain points then, or these hurdles or challenges, are beneficial for you because you can understand there's a problem that needs to be solved, and this is certainly helpful for you so as to further develop it. And what is more, I try to focus also upon archival and secondary data. So as mentioned, documents, for instance, rooster listings, all kinds of printable data or data that are out there on the internet, which you can get hold of so as to better comprehend what is the actual context about and how do, for instance, people relate to one another in an online environment, for instance, on Instagram, for the sake of argument, or what are they posting on TikTok, what are their leniencies, their favorites, etc. So this is going to be explorable by means of making use of archival and secondary data and or ethnography or ethnography. And after that, in session 10, we are focusing upon the third phase of the design thinking process, which revolves around the question of how can we build up usually an extreme user case, i.e. a single person, a personal point of view, which guides our efforts throughout the next phases, namely the phases 4 to 6. And usually this is an extreme case built upon the interviews you conducted or the participant observational insights you gathered. And revolving around this very person, you try to develop some kind of solution later on. But first of all, you really try to define what makes up this person. So is it a lady or is it a gentleman? How old or young is this person? Under which kind of circumstances does this person live? What is her or his problem? And you really try to let a person come to life so as to then work on a solution later on in the next phases. Having said that, the 11th session will revolve around the question of generating new ideas. And this is the so-called ideate phase. Here you really try to come up with new solutions for the potential person that you defined in the third phase. And then in the first session, it's still about generating ideas, but also narrowing down ideas so as to properly come to a workable solution. A workable solution is already the entree for the 13th, i.e. the last session, where we are confronted, and I try to introduce to you the 5th phase, the prototyping phase, because you narrow down ideas in the 4th phase so as to come up with a viable prototype. So something usually that you can touch and deal with physically, which is deemed being a prototype, i.e. a workable solution, which is not perfect at this point in time and maybe even only present in the form of a Lego building, or in the case of a prototype in the form of some kind of material such as paper, plastic or other materials, but something which you can present then in the 6th phase, the so-called testing phase, to the potential user base or actual user base or the potential customer base. And you try to really confront these persons with your idea, with your prototype that you developed, and try to collect all kinds of feedback from this very situation. So you ask the persons, for instance, how does it feel? What are your impressions about it? While at the same time, less directly, you try to observe how the person is using the respective product you devised or service or business model, and also implicitly try to sketch some cues. So for instance, you try to film the person, as I'm also being filmed by now, and try to understand how does she or he react? What are the also subliminal reactions, and not only those being aired verbally, so as to get a thorough understanding of the whole experience. Having said that, I'd like to start with the first session, and here I'd like to draw your attention to the overarching learning mechanism. So first of all, it's a flipped, as you have realized by now, a flipped learning methodology, i.e. I'm teaching this content, while at the same time, apart from these online lectures, you are supposed to work on a design thinking related project, which is usually a group-based work, and you get additional material being provided apart from this video lecture, the accompanying set of slides, and tips and tricks I provided to you from online resources from the other lecturers working in this class setting.